James stepped off the transport platform with one small bag in his hand. The Galactic Academy rose in front of him like a city made of glass and metal. Tall towers curved toward the sky, glowing with soft lights that shifted colors as ships passed overhead. The air felt clean and strange, filled with quiet sounds he could not name. Around him, students from many worlds gathered. Some were tall and thin, others wide and heavy. Some walked on two legs like him, while others moved on many limbs or floated slightly above the ground. James noticed eyes watching him. They were curious, careful, and sometimes doubtful. Humans were rare here. Emily walked beside him, her steps light but steady. She smiled, trying to hide her nerves. Daniel followed close behind, his shoulders tight as he looked around. None of them spoke much. They had trained for years for this moment, but training could not prepare them for being this far from home. Alien instructors waited near the entrance. Their bodies were covered in smooth armor-like skin, and their voices sounded calm but distant. One of them read from a floating screen and paused when James stepped forward. "So small," the instructor said, not unkindly. "All three of them." Another instructor nodded. "Fragile species. Observation track only." James heard the words. He did not react. He had learned long ago that reacting only made people look closer. Instead, he lowered his eyes and followed the instructions given to him. They were led through wide halls filled with light. Symbols moved along the walls, changing as students passed. James kept his breathing slow and even. His heart beat steady, not fast. Emily glanced at him once as if checking whether he was all right. He gave her a small nod. The first stop was the intake chamber. Each student was asked to step onto a smooth platform. Lights passed over their bodies. The scans were routine, meant to check health and record basic data. When James stepped forward, the machine hummed softly. Lines of light moved from his feet to his head. A technician watched the screen. His eyes narrowed for just a moment. "That's odd," he muttered. James heard it. He stayed still. The technician tapped the screen, then shook his head. "Probably calibration noise," he said to himself. He cleared the note and waved James off the platform. No one else noticed. They were given their schedules and living quarters. James's room was small and simple. A bed, a desk, and a window that looked out at the stars. He placed his bag down and sat on the edge of the bed. For a moment, he let the quiet settle around him. This place felt old. Not in a broken way, but in a careful way, like something that had survived many storms. Classes began the next day. In the main lecture hall, James sat near the back. The hall was filled with students speaking in many languages. Some looked toward the humans with open interest. Others barely looked at them at all. The instructor spoke about galactic history, about wars long past and alliances that rose and fell. James listened closely. He took notes by hand, even though the academy offered faster tools. Writing helped him focus. When the instructor asked a question, few students answered. James knew the answer. He kept quiet. Emily noticed and frowned slightly but said nothing. During a practical lesson, an alarm sounded without warning. The lights dimmed and the floor vibrated. Several students cried out. A few panicked and ran. James did not move. He stayed where he was, feet planted, eyes scanning the room. He guided Emily toward a wall without speaking, placing himself between her and the crowd. Daniel followed, breathing hard. Instructors rushed in and shut the alarm down. It had been a test. A simple one. Later, the instructors reviewed recordings. They saw many reactions: fear, confusion, aggression. They also saw James. "He did not panic," one instructor said. "He did not freeze either," another replied. "He assessed." "He is human," the first said. "That is unusual. Humans survived a harsh world," the second said. "Still fragile." They moved on. James spent his days quietly. He studied. He observed. He helped when asked and stayed silent when not. Some students began to sit near him, drawn by his calm. Others avoided him, uneasy without knowing why. One afternoon, a medical assistant stopped him in the hall. "Follow-up scan," she said. "Routine." James nodded and followed. The scan took longer this time. The machine paused twice, then restarted itself. The assistant frowned but did not speak. When it was done, she looked at the screen for a long moment. "Everything fine?" James asked. She blinked, surprised by his voice. "Yes," she said quickly. "Of course." She sent the data away without adding a comment. That night, James stood by his window and looked at the stars. Somewhere far away was Earth. A small world, loud and messy, full of mistakes and hope. He thought of the long history no one here remembered. The choices made long ago. He rested his hand against the glass. Tomorrow would be another day at the academy. Another day of learning. Another day of being unseen. And for now, that was exactly how James wanted it. The genetics classroom was colder than the others. The air carried a soft hum from machines built into the walls and floor. Clear tables held glowing panels, each one showing strands of moving light that stood for life itself. James sat near the back as usual. He listened while the instructor explained how species across the galaxy were identified by their genetic patterns. Some were simple. Some were complex. All were carefully recorded. Today, the instructor said, we will run a live comparison. Volunteers only. Many students looked away. Genetics could be personal and mistakes could be embarrassing. A few alien students raised their limbs with pride, eager to show off rare traits. James did not move at first. Emily glanced at him. You know this already, she whispered. James hesitated. Then he raised his hand. The room grew quiet in a different way. Some students turned to look at him. A few made low sounds of surprise. Humans rarely volunteered for public scans. The instructor paused. You are certain? He asked. Yes, James said simply. He walked to the front and stood beside the main scanner. The machine was taller than him, shaped like a curved arch of light. He stepped inside when told. Remain still, the instructor said. The scan began. Light moved over James's body, slow and careful. On the large display behind him, strands of color appeared. At first, everything looked normal. The instructor spoke calmly, explaining basic markers common to humans. Then the display changed. The colors shifted. New patterns appeared. The room fell silent. The instructor stopped speaking. Students leaned forward. Some screens flickered as personal devices tried to identify the pattern. Several failed and went dark. That is not human standard, someone whispered. The instructor frowned and adjusted the controls. The system may have auto-linked a comparative archive, he said, though his voice lacked confidence. The display highlighted several markers in bright white. A name appeared beneath them. An ancient name. The instructor's hands froze. No, he said quietly. At the back of the room, two observers stood up. Michael and Lauren, senior researchers assigned to the academy, moved closer to the display. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were sharp. Run the comparison again, Michael said. The instructor did so. The machine paused, then processed the data again. The same result appeared. Lauren crossed her arms. That species is listed as extinct. Not extinct, Michael corrected. Gone. A murmur spread through the room. James stood inside the scanner, unaware of the details but aware of the change in the air. He felt the weight of many eyes on him. He stayed still, breathing slow. What does it mean? A student asked. The instructor swallowed. This genetic pattern belongs to a protector species from early galactic history. A species known for extreme adaptability, resilience, and restraint. That's not possible, another student said. They vanished before modern records. Michael turned to James. Step out, please. James did. Lauren walked around him slowly, not touching, just observing. No visible differences, she said. No enhancements. He looks normal, Michael said. James met their eyes. Is something wrong? Michael hesitated. We believe there has been a data error. Lauren nodded quickly. Yes, a deep one. They dismissed the class early. Students left in confused groups, whispering and glancing back at James. Emily waited for him near the door. What happened? She asked. I'm not sure, James said. Michael stopped them. James, you will come with us for a private review. Emily opened her mouth to argue. James shook his head slightly. It's fine, he said. They led him to a secure lab deeper in the academy. The room was quiet and bright, filled with old-looking machines mixed with new ones. Lauren activated a second scanner, older but more detailed. This system is isolated, she said. No external archives. James stepped in again. The scan took longer this time. Much longer. Data filled the screens, layer after layer. Michael watched in silence. Lauren tapped commands, her movements growing slower as the results came in. No contamination, she said softly. No artificial edits, Michael added. The ancient markers appeared again. Clear. Stable. Complete. Lauren leaned back. This cannot be coincidence. Michael rubbed his face. If this is real, then humans did not simply evolve alone. James listened. You're talking like I'm not here. Michael looked at him. You are here. That is the problem. Lauren faced James directly. James, do you know anything about this? James thought of old stories. Half-forgotten lessons. Warnings about strength and silence. No, he said truthfully. Michael stared at the screen. These markers matched the protector species exactly. Not partially. Not by chance. Lauren whispered, they were known for one thing above all. James waited. They chose not to rule, she said. Silence filled the room. Michael straightened. This data stays sealed. No reports. No broadcasts. Lauren nodded. If the council sees this too soon, they will panic, Michael finished. James stepped out of the scanner. What happens to me? Michael met his eyes. For now, nothing. Lauren added, you return to class. You live as you were. James nodded. That was what he wanted. As he left the lab, Michael looked back at the screen one last time. An extinct species, he said quietly, standing in our academy classroom. Lauren did not answer. Outside, James rejoined Emily and Daniel. Life at the academy continued as normal. Students laughed. Ships passed overhead. But somewhere deep in the records, a truth had woken up. And it was no longer asleep. The private tests did not stop. They became quieter. James was called in during empty hours, early in the morning or late at night. Different machines were used. Older ones. Slower ones. The kind that did not rush to conclusions. James answered questions when asked and stayed silent when not. He did not complain. He did not ask for special treatment. Michael and Lauren were careful. They tested everything twice, then 3 times. They compared James's results with old data pulled from deep archives. Data that most people no longer studied. Every test said the same thing. The markers were real. But one result changed everything. Lauren stood still as she read the screen. These traits are dormant, she said softly. Michael looked up. Dormant. They're present in the genome, she explained, but inactive. Like a system placed into sleep. Michael frowned. Why would a species do that to itself? Lauren did not answer right away. They brought in 2 more researchers. Jessica and John were specialists in ancient records and lost civilizations. They were older than most staff, slower in movement but sharp in thought. Jessica studied the genetic patterns first. This isn't a single match, she said. It's a template. John leaned over her shoulder. You're saying it's not just James? Yes, Jessica replied. He's not an exception. James sat quietly nearby. He's a proof, John finished. Michael's eyes narrowed. Then we need more data. They ran scans on stored human samples. Medical archives. Volunteer data from Earth exchange programs. Old, forgotten files that had never been deeply analyzed. The results came back one by one. Each time the same dormant markers appeared. Weaker. Fainter. But present. Lauren whispered, it's all of them. Humans were not hybrids by accident. They were descendants by choice. Jessica and John moved away from genetics and into history. They accessed sealed records, some damaged by time, others intentionally hidden. It took days to piece fragments together. Old star maps. Broken translations. Warnings written in dead languages. John finally spoke one evening, his voice low. I think we misunderstood the disappearance. Jessica nodded slowly. They didn't fall. They stepped away. They reconstructed the story carefully. Long ago, the protector species had reached a point where nothing could threaten them. They were stronger, faster, and more adaptable than any other known life. The galaxy feared them even as it relied on them. But the protectors saw what power was doing to younger civilizations. So they made a choice. They reduced themselves. They changed their form. They altered their future. They scattered to harsh worlds where survival required restraint, cooperation, and patience. Worlds where raw power alone was not enough. Earth was one of them. Humans were not created to rule. They were shaped to endure. Jessica looked at James across the room. You didn't inherit their strength. No, John said. You inherited their decision. Word spread slowly at first. Whispers among staff. Glances in the halls. Then questions. Then fear. The academy leadership demanded answers. Michael presented the findings in a closed chamber. Screens showed clean data. No emotion. Just truth. Humans carry dormant traits of the ancient protectors, he said. All of them. A council member leaned forward. Why are the traits inactive? Jessica answered. Because activation was never the goal. Another asked, can they be awakened? Lauren replied, yes. Under extreme threat. Or extreme need. Silence followed. The news could not be contained. Students noticed the change first. Instructors watched humans more closely. Security systems updated their profiles. Humans were no longer listed as low risk. James felt it in the way people stepped aside for him. The way conversations stopped when he entered a room. Emily frowned. I don't like this. Neither do I, James said. Daniel asked quietly, is it true? James nodded. It looks that way. But you're still you, Emily said. Yes, James replied. That hasn't changed. The Academy issued a statement. Careful words. No panic. No accusations. But the shock was real. Across the station, debates started. Some students were afraid. Others were angry. A few were relieved. They could have ruled us, one alien student said. And they didn't. Another replied, that's what scares me. James continued attending classes. He sat in the same seat. He took the same notes. But now instructors watched him closely as if waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. Jessica and John finished their report late one night. John leaned back tired. They chose restraint over domination. Jessica nodded. And paid for it by being underestimated. John smiled faintly. Or protected by it. James was called in one last time. Michael spoke first. The galaxy will never see humans the same way again. James considered this. That's not what we wanted. Lauren studied him. What did you want? To learn, James said. And to be left alone. Jessica laughed softly. That may no longer be possible. James stood. Then I'll do what humans always do. And what is that? John asked. James met their eyes. We live with the choices we made. Outside the lab, the Academy lights glowed brighter than before. Ships moved carefully through space. Messages spread from system to system. The truth was out. Not that humans were powerful, but that they had been powerful, and chose not to be. The chamber was larger than any classroom James had seen. The ceiling curved high above, covered in slow-moving lights that copied distant stars. Leaders from many worlds filled the seats, their shapes and colors forming a quiet circle of power. James stood at the center. He did not wear anything special, just his student uniform. His hands were at his sides. His face was calm. Ashley and David stood near the wall with other observers. Ashley watched James closely, her eyes sharp. David folded his arms, unsure what he expected to see. A tall alien leader spoke first. You carry the legacy of the ancient protectors. Why did your species never claim this role? James thought for a moment before answering. He did not rush. Because it was never about power, he said. The room stayed silent. Another leader leaned forward. Your kind could have ruled. You still could. James shook his head slowly. Ruling does not stop fear. It only moves it. A low sound moved through the chamber. Some leaders shifted. Others listened more closely. Our world was dangerous, James continued. We learned early that strength alone breaks things. Survival needed something else. Ashley glanced at David. He's not avoiding the question, she whispered. He believes this. A leader with glowing eyes asked, then what was the goal? James answered simply. To live. And to let others live. The leaders exchanged looks. You hid your strength, another said. You allowed yourselves to be seen as weak. James nodded. Yes. Why? The leader asked. Because being feared is easy, James said. Being trusted is harder. The words hung in the air. David felt a strange weight in his chest. He had studied humans from a distance. This was not what he expected. One leader stood. Then explain this restraint. Why silence such power? James remembered the old lessons. The quiet rules passed down without ceremony. Power changes how others see you, he said. And how you see yourself. We chose limits so we wouldn't forget who we were. Another voice rose. You risked extinction. Yes, James said. Many times. Ashley frowned. They chose danger over dominance, she murmured. The leader returned to his seat. And now that the truth is known. James looked around the chamber. Now we keep choosing. The council offered him a position. Advisor. Protector. Symbol. The words sounded heavy. James listened. Then shook his head. I'm just a student, he said. The chamber reacted at once. Surprise. Confusion. Disbelief. You would refuse? A leader asked. Yes. Why? Because the moment I stop being a student, James said, I stop learning. And learning is how we survive. Ashley smiled despite herself. David nodded slowly. He's serious. The leaders spoke among themselves in low tones. Some were frustrated. others thoughtful. You ask us to trust a species that hides its strength, one said. James met their gaze. We don't ask for trust. We earn it. The meeting ended without a ruling. No orders. No demands. James walked out the same way he had walked in. In the halls, students watched him pass. Some bowed their heads. Some stepped aside. James did neither. Ashley caught up to him. You could have changed everything in there. I didn't want to, James said. David joined them. Most would have taken the offer. James stopped walking. That's the point. They stood in silence for a moment. Across the academy, messages moved between systems. Leaders shared what they had heard. Not threats. Not plans. Just words. Humans had power. Humans chose not to use it. The galaxy began to understand that humanity's strength was not in what it could do, but in what it refused to become. The changes did not come with alarms or speeches. They came quietly like updates sliding into place. In the Academy archives, a single line was rewritten. Humans were no longer listed as weak or fragile. They were listed as inheritors. Not rulers. Not conquerors. Inheritors who chose peace. Only a few noticed at first. Instructors adjusted lesson plans. Security systems lowered their alert tones around human students, not higher. Researchers rewrote old theories and erased careless assumptions. No announcements were made, but the meaning was clear. The galaxy had learned something new. James walked through the halls the same way he always had. He did not walk faster. He did not walk slower. He carried his books under one arm and kept his eyes forward. Some students still watched him, but many no longer did. That was fine with him. He entered the classroom and took his usual seat. Emily sat beside him, her notebook already open. She glanced at him and smiled, small and normal. Did we miss anything? She asked. Just the beginning, James said. The instructor started the lesson without pause. No one mentioned councils or ancient species. Equations filled the screens. Questions were asked. Answers were given. Life continued. At break, an alien student hesitated before sitting near James. Then he did. They shared notes without speaking much. It felt ordinary. That mattered. Across the academy, messages traveled outward. To research stations. To border worlds. To quiet systems that had never met a human before. The story spread not as fear but as understanding. Humans had once held great power. They had let it go. On distant worlds, leaders reviewed the records and paused longer than expected. Some felt relief. Others felt shame. A few felt hope. Michael and Lauren sealed the final reports. Jessica and John archived the restored history, placing it where it could not be hidden again. None of them added praise. None added warnings. The facts were enough. James passed the genetics lab without stopping. The door was closed. The machines inside were silent. That chapter was done. Later he stood by the wide window at the end of the hall. Stars filled the dark, calm and distant. Each one held a story. Some loud. Some forgotten. Emily joined him. Do you think they'll leave us alone now? James thought for a moment. Maybe, he said. Or maybe they'll watch us more carefully. And that doesn't bother you? He shook his head. We've lived with that before. The bell sounded. Classes resumed. James returned to his seat. He raised his hand once, answered a question, then lowered it again. No one stared. No one whispered. That was the choice he had made. Far beyond the academy, the lesson settled into the galaxy like a steady light. Power does not prove worth. Control does not equal wisdom. The strongest species is not the one that rules. It is the one that knows when not to.